Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I want to welcome all our viewers from around the globe to today's presentation, Communicating Across Cultures, brought to you by a joint collaboration between the World Trade Center Barcelona, Boston, Dublin, and Washington, D.C. All part of the World Trade Center Association's international network, which consists of over 320 trade centers and represents over 90 countries worldwide. We are delighted to see so many of our colleagues and friends tuning in today from all the countries around the world. During this uncertain time, together, we can truly make a difference. Thank you for attending. First and foremost, I want to wish everyone a safe and happy World Trade Day. My name is Carolyn Jepson, and I head up the Marketing Communications Department for the World Trade Center Dublin. We are pleased to be hosting this session in conjunction with WebPort Global and the PR Training Academy. To give you a brief overview, the World Trade Center Dublin focuses on international trade, promotions, and works with SMEs to provide and connect them to opportunities throughout the world. WebPort Global is an online platform where members can connect with other trade professionals and showcase their products and services to our global network. Now, I have the privilege of introducing our speaker, an entrepreneur, an accomplished author, motivational speaker, and longtime colleague and friend, whose company has just received the prestigious Stevie Award from the American Business Association for PR Innovation of the Year, Miss Ellen Gunning. Ellen is the director of the PR Training Academy, which offers professionals a variety of online first-rate communication courses. Today, Ellen will help us navigate through these uncharted waters using effective communication skills and techniques. Just a few quick notes before we begin. We will be recording this session. If you will please keep your mics on mute during the presentation and send your questions via the chat button. Those questions will be answered at the end of the session. Now, without further ado, I will pass the screen to Ellen. Ellen, please take it away. Thank you.
Carolyn, thanks for a super introduction. Our topic today is communication across cultures, and one of the wonderful things about the world we live in is the diversity of cultures, the diversity of food and language and everything that goes into that mix that makes up culture. So let me begin by sharing some of my culture with you. My background is that I'm from Ireland, so may I speak to you Oscailge for just a couple of minutes. Gomani di Asmura Yiv Goler Tha Anna Hasaram Behanshala Venu is more an ordom. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you this afternoon. And Carolyn, thank you for the opportunity to host this webinar. I first came into contact with WebPort Global probably 15 years ago now, when my business was operating in Ireland only. In those 15 years since, we have begun to operate globally. We now have a presence in 50 countries around the world. And throughout that entire time, WebPort Global have provided us with phenomenal support. They've created introductions for us. They've opened up new markets to us. And I suppose my two favorite words are world domination. And WebPort Global has been the secret weapon in our quest for world domination. So thank you for all the help and support, Carolyn, down throughout all of the years. Let me tell you something about the Public Relations Training Academy before we begin. We provide short online courses for communications professionals, things like how to negotiate sponsorship, writing brilliant feature articles, shooting video with your smartphone, or training your voice for radio. I've been in PR and communications for the best part of 30 years now. And the one thing I'm sure of is that post-COVID, our lives have changed, our businesses have changed, and communications has come front and center. And I think it is here to stay. It will be here for a long time to come. As business leaders, you are now communicating directly with employees, stakeholders, customers, and the community. You're using platforms you never previously used. You're speaking to an audience of people who are spending their time on the internet and who are searching for information and reassurance and leadership. Your staff need the communication skills to help your business negotiate this new environment and manage it effectively. And that's a big, big challenge. I want to share 4 elements of public relations with you today. The simplification of messaging, the power of visual imagery, the need for cross-cultural awareness, and the sheer speed of communications. So let's have a look. Simplification of the message. Barack Obama is the person I credit with publicly coming up with the shortest message first. Yes, we can. You remember the slogan? What does yes, we can mean? It's yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. It means everything and nothing. It is empowering, it is uplifting, it is very effective, and it is completely without substance. But it's something we can all get behind because it doesn't actually mean anything specific. So it could mean anything we want to, and it crosses all barriers. Barack Obama may have started it, but Donald Trump learned very quickly. He came up with the slogan, if we can have a look at the next slide there, make America great again. Very clever. Make America great again, not make America great, because that suggests that America hasn't always been great or isn't great or improvement. Make America great again. We have been great. Great what? Great Olympians, great business people, great in the space race. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. It's empowering, it's uplifting, it's effective, and it doesn't mean anything, or it means everything to everybody, which effectively means it means nothing. If we move slightly across the water and look at Boris Johnson in the UK, he took the slogan, get Brexit done. Let's have a look.
Here it is. Here is the route map to take us forward. We pledge 50,000 more nurses and their bursaries and 50 million more GP surgery appointments. And today we make this guarantee to the British people.
Isn't it brilliant? Get Brexit done. What on earth does that mean? It means get it done, get it over with, we're tired of it. What is it? What does getting it done mean? Nobody knows, but the messaging is simple. Everybody can hook onto it because it means something to them. It means that we will end immigration, or we will become a great world power again, or we will leave the European Union, or that we will stay in the European Union. It doesn't matter. It means whatever you want it to mean. Could I flash on to the next slide and have a look at Donald Trump, please? And this is a really interesting one. Let me show you this first, because this combines the power of the short sentence and the power of the visual. Have a look at this press conference.
Dad, we went through hell unfairly, did nothing wrong, did nothing wrong. I've done things wrong in my life, I will admit. Not purposely, but I've done things wrong. But this is what the end result is. You could take that home, honey. Maybe we'll frame it. It's the only good headline I've ever had in the Washington Post.
Isn't that an incredible piece of footage? Look at what he did. He said, done nothing wrong. Done nothing wrong. The message is being hammered into your head. That is what he wants you to take away. I've done nothing wrong. The visual is Trump acquitted. And the visual is Washington Post, Trump acquitted. And he uses the paper for quite some time, so that if you never heard the voiceover, if you only saw the picture, if you never knew what the story was, you know that something happened. He was accused of something, but he is innocent. He has been acquitted. Very, very clever. The other thing that's really interesting about that clip is this is a man who bypassed all of the traditional media. This is a man who had no time, basically, for the print media, for television, other than Fox News, for radio. His preferred way to communicate with people was by Twitter, and he was extraordinarily effective at it, and still is. But he's holding up the Washington Post. So even though the paper doesn't normally cover him, and he says it's not important, he actually recognizes that the Washington Post comes from a much higher credibility source. It really means something if the Washington Post says you have been acquitted. And interestingly, one of the statistics that's coming through from the COVID-19 situation is that people are really struggling, really struggling, looking for where can they get news from a believable source, from a credible source. So you actually have newspapers running advertisements in Ireland saying things like news worth paying for because it's from a credible source. And you've CNN running ads that say in a crisis, facts matter. So Donald Trump recognizes the imprimatur that Washington Post brings him, even if he says he has no respect for it. Think of the visual, and let's look at how the visuals have become important and the power of a visual storytelling. Can we have a look at the next clip there, please? So the power of visuals, look at this photograph. More and more nowadays, the photograph actually tells you everything that you need to know. So this photograph says what? This photograph says danger. This photograph says life-threatening. Definitely a virus, COVID-19. The only thing we don't know is where. How do we know it's COVID-19? The only reason we know it's COVID-19 is because this is a current photograph. You're looking at it now, and COVID-19 is happening right now. If COVID-19 had never happened, then we would be looking at this photograph saying, was that MERS? Was that SARS? Was that Ebola? The picture tells you life-threatening virus. We are in great danger. It tells an entire story. Let's look at the next one if we can. This photograph, entirely different. This was quite a big story in Ireland recently because it's the first gay marriage in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is a different jurisdiction. We've had gay marriage for a long time now in Ireland, but in Northern Ireland, it was the first gay marriage. This picture says what? Happy ever after, bride and bride. May you have a long and happy life together. They're in love. This photograph is probably very culturally divisive. Let's look at the next one. It too tells a story. What can you tell from this photograph? You can tell that there has been another mass shooting in America. You know this by the guy in front, you know it by the bus behind, you know it by the age group, it's a high school, you know it by the age group. All of the signals send you that it's America, it's a mass shooting. Oh my gosh, what do you not know? How many people dead? Have people been injured? What's the story behind it? But you instantly get the nub. The picture tells you this is what's happened. So you walk past a television in a shop window and you see this visual, you've got the story. You know something has happened in the States and there's been a shooting and you don't know where. Let's look at the next example if we can. This is from London, and this is literally holding the tide back. This photograph says global warming. It's a really serious issue. Look at how high the level of water is. Look at how close it is to all the buildings beside. This is literally holding the tide back. Look at that poor devil with a for sale sign up on that house. That house is never going to sell. Never. It is so likely to be drowned in water. You won't sell it at all. But this picture tells you the world is going in the wrong direction. We are not getting to grips with the environmental issues at all in our time. Let's look at the next one if we can. And this is an individual, Harvey Weinstein. What are we looking at here? The face of evil? This man preyed on women horrifically. This man is a monster, an evil monster. And he is now in prison, and he will probably be in prison for the rest of his life. And I don't know that many people would say, isn't that tough? I think most people would say he well deserves to be there. You look at this photograph and you think, this is the face of evil. But you could equally look at this photograph and say, this is the face of empowerment. This is the face of a man who empowered women enough that they stood up and said, I will not put up with this anymore. Hashtag me too. This has happened to me as well. You were brave enough to say it happened to you. Well, hashtag me too, girl. It also happened to me. And he started an entire group of people, a movement of women who said, we will not put up with this kind of behavior from powerful men anymore. We will not be their puppets. We will not be abused. So he could equally be seen as the face of empowerment. The next photograph is a photograph of Princess Diana, Prince Charles's first wife, UK. Princess Diana died tragically in Paris at a very young age. Diana was all over the news. When I was in Estonia in September of last year, there was a photograph of Diana everywhere I went in Tallinn. But it was a photograph of Diana not looking beautiful like this, looking beautiful and flicking the finger. And everywhere I went, I saw it and I thought, what is that about? Who is she supposed to be flicking the finger at? Is she flicking a finger at the royal family, what she referred to as the firm, who had never treated her well? Is she flicking a finger at the media, who hounded her? I actually ended up, I couldn't make sense of it. I didn't know what it was about. And I met by pure chance, we were looking to appoint our own social media agency in Eastern Europe. And we were talking to a company in Tallinn. And this photograph, or the photograph of Diana flicking her finger, was on the walls in their offices. And I said to them, what is that about? And they said, oh, we're responsible for that. And I said, but what's the story? I'm old enough to know. These were younger than me. And I said, I'm old enough to know. I remember Diana getting married. I remember the children being born. I remember her whole life. I lived through it all with her. She never, ever, ever flicked the finger at anybody. And they said, no, of course she didn't. We know that. This is from an exhibition. It's a photographic exhibition that's being held in Tallinn that I actually went to see afterwards. And the photographic exhibition was of lookalikes. You really had to look carefully to see that you weren't actually looking at Diana flicking the finger. You were looking at somebody who looked like Diana, who was flicking a finger. The entire exhibition was about fake news. How on earth do you tell anymore the difference between what is real and what is fake? I had questioned the fact that she had never actually flicked her finger at anybody. I had definitely thought that the photograph had been doctored. It never occurred to me that it wasn't Diana because it looked so like her. So visual, the power of a visual and its ability to tell a story. Visual, we've looked at stills visuals. Let me look at a video clip with you. And in this video clip, let me tell you just a little bit of background. This clip went viral at around noon one day in Ireland. This is from an Apple Green petrol station, and the Apple Green petrol station, it's like Circle K or any one of the chains you have around the world. It's a very well-known chain of petrol stations. You call in, you fill up at the pump, you pick up your sandwiches. This was from the catering area in one particular petrol station. Watch the catering pan on the left-hand side, the brown catering pan. Now, there's a whole debate about how that actually came to be shot and why it was issued on social media. I'm not going to get into that. But what I do want you to be aware of is this broke at about 12 o'clock in the day. It literally became viral. Everybody started sharing it and saying, oh my gosh, did you see what happened? This is unreal. By 6 o'clock that evening, the company Apple Green had a spokesperson standing in front of that petrol station. The spokesperson was standing in front of a building which had been completely emptied. You are now looking at 4 walls. You walked inside and there was nothing. The spokesperson was saying, we think this is horrific. We couldn't believe that this happened. In fact, we have taken everything out of the station. There is nothing left. We are bringing in forensic deep cleaners. We want to make sure this never happens again. We are not that kind of company. And outside, the visual showed you people actually poking at shores so that it looked as if they were looking for the rat, but they were wearing yellow jackets and they looked very serious. It probably cost the company the guts of, I don't know, 200,000, 300,000 to move as quickly as they did, but they killed off the story pretty much instantly, because within 4 hours, what you saw was this is a company who wouldn't put up with this. They care. They have eliminated the problem. The following morning, the company Brennan's Bread, who produced the bread, issued a statement, and they said, in effect, the rat was not in the bread when it left our bakery. This was not our rat. And I thought, what are they doing getting involved in this? The story is not their story. It's an Apple Green story. But when I looked at the media publicity, about 50% of the publicity was about the petrol station. 50% of it said a rat in Brennan's Bread. So they were right. They had actually been snaffled into a whole crisis scenario that was not of their making because of that piece of visual. Let me move on from that if I can and talk to you about culture. Because one of the fascinating things with culture is you try so hard to be culturally aware, to watch what it is you're doing, and yet it's so easy to get it wrong and to cause offense. France, let me give you a a tale about France. In Ireland, I attended a function quite a number of years ago, and there was an Irish company which had been acquired by a French company. The launch event was handled by a PR consultancy, and they had invited a junior minister. Now, I should explain, in Ireland, you would have a senior minister for transport and communications. That minister might have 3 junior ministers. So one might be responsible for public transport, one might be responsible for the transportation infrastructure, one might be responsible for communications. So a senior and 3 junior ministers. All of the ministers would be introduced as minister. That would be Irish style. On this occasion, the minister had spoken. The French owner, the new owner, stood up to speak and said that he was delighted, opening comments, he was delighted that somebody had listened to him when he said that this was much more important and way above the grade of a junior minister. He was delighted to see that somebody had listened to him and got the full minister here to recognize the value of what they were bringing to the Irish society. He was speaking to the junior minister. And the junior minister spent, I don't know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks afterwards telling anybody who would listen about this arrogant Frenchman who had behaved so badly. What everybody heard, what every Irish person heard, was here was a company that had invested in an Irish company. The government had thought it important enough to send a representative to say a blessing on all your houses and thank you for doing this and isn't this wonderful? And the French owner had disrespected the government sending the minister. I don't know if it affected them long term, but I know that the negative gossip arising from it was very, very big. Let's look at the next one if we can. And this is Ireland. Well, I would have to go to Ireland, wouldn't I? I served on a national committee a number of years ago with a government minister. And part of our remit was to look at the working and business lives of women in Ireland. And we literally sat in meetings where people came in and made presentations to us and made us aware of things that we wouldn't have been aware of otherwise. On one occasion, a man came in, he was probably in his 30s. He was a kind of devil may care sort of a guy, you know, he was easygoing, he was on top of all of this, he was a bit too cool for school. And he arrived in and his opening comment was, "Good evening, girls." And he got no further. The minister literally barked at him and said, "I'll have you know there are no girls here. We're all women." It didn't matter what he said after that. He was dead in the water. I can't remember what his presentation was about. And she played with him like a cat plays with a mouse for the rest of the meeting. What he had done was he had treated her as if she was somebody junior to him, which she definitely wasn't. Let me look at the next one, if I may. If you look at the UK, I give presentations for the British Embassy in Dublin and for the Scottish and Welsh offices in Ireland when they're bringing in incoming entrepreneurs looking to do business in Ireland. One of the things I always chat to them about is the difference in how Irish and English people talk about their qualifications. Irish people are inclined to downplay their qualifications. English people like to bump them up so that they're in your face and you know how qualified they are. A lovely lady came up to me after a presentation and she said, "I wonder, would you mind if I tried out my introduction to you and you could tell me what it's like?" And I said, "Certainly, with apologies to anybody from the UK who's listening to my bad interpretation of a British accent." So I said, "Certainly, tell me, how is it that you introduce yourself?" And she said, "Well, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Bloop and I'm the managing director of X company and I'm a qualified nuclear physicist and I'm the author of 3 books and an expert speaker. I'm very pleased to meet you." And she said, "Well, is that okay?" And I said, "Honestly, to Irish ears, after the first 30 seconds, I lost the will to do business with you. You are so self-important. I don't know how you found time to be in a room with me. Go away. I don't want to deal with you." It's a terrible introduction. You introduce yourself and say, "Hello, I'm Elizabeth Bloop," and you go from there. Because anybody meeting you already knows you are a managing director. They know what your qualifications are. We're still in touch. And she contacted me about 3 months afterwards and said, "You won't believe this. The only thing that I changed was the way that I introduced myself at meetings. And I have been called back so many times for second meetings since. And the only thing I can put it down to is the way I introduced myself." Cultural difference. Let me have a look at the next one, if I may. Mongolia. I was here a number of years ago and I had done as I thought. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to Holland. Let's do Holland next. Whatever one pops up next. Super. Holland. We dealt with a colleague last year and we were looking at buying product from them. And I had asked one of my colleagues to hop in and literally have a look and see test the product, see what it was like. Was it any good? She stopped me after a while and said, by the way, we've just run out of the test period on that product, and they don't want us to buy 5 licenses. And I said, don't be ridiculous. Just tell them you want to test a little bit longer. And after a while, she came back and said, no, I'm really sorry. They said, we can't test longer. They need us to spend €75 on 5 licenses. So I emailed the company and said that I was appalled. Now, the use of the word appalled in the first sentence, I thought should have sent a flag that said, this woman's getting really annoyed. But I said, basically, I was appalled that they were looking for €75 to pay for this product when we had made it quite clear that in Q1, we would be investing €625,000 with them. What was this all about? And the Dutch company came back and said, but it doesn't matter. You've run out of testing time. You need to buy the licenses. And I responded back and said, thank you very much, but we won't be dealing with you. I thought there was a difference in corporate culture. We would have tried to resolve the issue for you, whether you were within license or not. I thought it was their corporate culture. A colleague said afterwards, no, it's not. It's actually the way the Dutch do business. And if they set the rules, they set the rules and they never change them. It's nothing personal. It's what they do. Let's have a look at the next one, if we may. And this is Australia. Thank you. So I was in Australia last year. And before I went, as you do, I had met with the Australian embassy and said, clue me in, what do I need to know about doing business in Australia? And they said, well, in Sydney in particular, it's sort of a bit like doing business with the New Yorkers. They're in your face, they're very straight. They'll tell you within 5 minutes or not whether they want to do business with you. And if they don't want to do business with you, it will be all over in 5 minutes. And I said, fine. Based on that knowledge, one of the meetings I went to, I met a lovely lady and she said, we were literally starting to chat. We had met in a cafe downstairs from her office. The coffee was in front of us and she said, no, I can tell you for a fact, we're not going to do any business with you. It isn't our thing. And I said, fine, no problem at all. And did not pursue it any further and said to her, but look, as we're sitting here having a coffee and you're from Sydney, tell me where I should be going in the evenings. Where's a good spot to pick up on music or to pick up on something else? And we just had a chat. And after 10 minutes or so, I stood up, shook hands with her, said, thanks a million. See you next time I'm back in Australia or whatever. Enjoyed that cup of coffee. And as I was leaving, she said, there are 2 companies I could introduce you to who would benefit from your services. Let me make the introduction while you're in Sydney so that you can meet them. I hadn't looked for it, but I probably would never have got it if I hadn't understood that when an Australian said, I'm not interested, you simply stopped the conversation there and then. Let me look at the next one if I may. So Mongolia. I was there a number of years ago. I love Mongolia. The people, I was in a ger, one of these big round tents that the Mongolians have, and they were passing snuff. And the snuff, everybody was snorting the snuff. And I was watching in horror as it came closer and closer to me because I knew about passing things with your left hand, but snuff was a whole other league. So when this snuff arrived, I promptly snorted up my left nostril. My eyes poured water. I coughed like a mad thing. But I didn't want to cause any cultural offense. And they had each done each nostril. So I promptly put it onto the right nostril, snorted the snuff and carried on. The following day, I mentioned it to a colleague and she said, were you the only woman in the ger? And I said, actually, I was. And she said, it's most unusual because a woman would normally take the snuff bottle, pass it under her nose and pass it on. You would never have to snort it. But I was so conscious of not causing any cultural offense, I snorted it. My lungs survived. I'm not quite sure how. Let me give you one other example of cultural difference. And this is President George W. Bush when he was president. This is on the eve of a visit that he was making to Ireland. Carol Coleman is the reporter interviewing him. And Carol Coleman is a reporter for RTE Television, which was the only national television station in the country at the time. Her style of questioning is what I want you to watch here. It's a short clip, but have a look and see what you think.
If I didn't think the world would be better.
Why is it that
let me finish. If calm,
but if your response to Iraq is considered...
Let me finish, please. You ask the questions and I'll answer them if you don't mind. Unanimously to say Mr. Saddam Hussein...
Indeed, Mr. President, but you didn't find the weapons of mass destruction.
May I finish? You got democracy in Pakistan. In other words,
but shouldn't that be on the top of the list?
Please for a minute, okay. It'd be better if you let me finish my answers and then you can follow up if you don't mind.
Isn't that an amazing clip? Any American that I spoke with who saw that clip said, Carol Coleman was very disrespectful. She was talking to the President of the United States, for heaven's sake, and she kept introducing him and barracking him, and she was just positively rude. And the Americans obviously saw it that way because there was a second interview lined up for either later that evening or the following morning for Laura Bush, George W. Bush's wife. She was to give an interview with the same television station, and they pulled the interview. And they were so annoyed by the way this interview was conducted. If Irish people looked at it, they said, but sure, of course she was right. We didn't see it as barracking at all, because we see the job of a journalist as holding somebody to account. So every time he said, let me tell you how wonderful I am, she said, I don't want to know how wonderful you are. I want an answer to the question. We're two cultures that are very alike, very, very alike. We speak the same language. There's a huge amount of American television in Irish life. And yet the interpretation of the interview was so completely different from both sides. Let me bring you to the fourth and final point, which is about the speed of communications. Communications has become faster and faster and faster. Last week, I was skimming, and I'm as guilty as anybody else. So I'm flicking through my LinkedIn feed, and this pops up. And I thought, what is that? 7 men? Wow. And I literally, with like seconds to spare, typed a comment that said, wow, not a single woman on the panel. Bing, gone, moved on, forgot all about it. About an hour and a half later, I came back. LinkedIn was in meltdown. Twitter was in meltdown. Apparently the poor guy who organized it was actually on national radio, and the first question he was asked was, how come there was no woman on the panel? He wasn't PR trained, so he started answering each one by saying, he started defending and saying, I'm really sorry, I didn't have time to contact any woman to find out, could we get a woman onto the panel? Hello. So that led to a number of women saying, really? You couldn't make one phone call? You could make 6 for other panelists, but you couldn't ring one woman? And he just made the crisis worse and worse and worse for himself. I'm sure that fellow will remember my name for 100 years. I won't remember his name tomorrow, because it was just a quick comment that I passed and moved on. But the very interesting thing was that one of my colleagues on LinkedIn sent me this. And this apparently is what happens if you have an all-male panel, a manel. And this is on, I can't remember, is it Tumblr, I think, where you have this David Hasselhoff in the middle. Don't ask me about this. I have no idea what this means. But David Hasselhoff with the thumb up is a Hoff stamp. And you put the Hoff stamp on anything which is an all-male panel to show how much you disapprove of the behavior. I just find it fascinating. I didn't even know it existed, but I launched an entire tsunami of comment based on one quick comment and moving on. Let me show you a very short video which the PR Training Academy has created, which I hope gives you a feeling for exactly how fast communications is moving.
In the past few years, social media has changed public relations in terms of the delivery system and the overall working efficiency. Crisis communications has become even more crucial. Social media has provided a whole new way for brands to mess up big time in front of their audience. It's also provided an easy platform for customers to air really bad customer experiences on Facebook and Twitter. As business leaders, we need to manage brand voice and protect our online reputation. Social media also brought about a new type of citizen journalist, the influencer. From Rich Lee of Radioactive PR, who as a Twitter influencer has more than 16,000 followers, to Sienna Elise Earp, who promotes the benefits of yoga to her 1.3 million Instagram followers, to the power of Samantha and Nick Chapman, Pixie Woo, whose 2.1 million YouTube subscribers take their tutorials to recreate the makeup looks of celebrities like Angelina Jolie or Rihanna. In the past, communication was a one-way street, but now customers are able to engage with brands and their content by liking, sharing and commenting on posts. We're operating in a 24/7 business environment in which everyone wants instant responses to immediate inquiries and ever quicker turnaround on their requirements. Couple that with an uncertain economic climate, a need for every discipline to prove its return on investment, and it's easy to see why as business leaders we put pressure on ourselves to deliver as much as possible, as quickly as possible, with as much impact as possible. PR has changed dramatically and will continue to do so. As business leaders, the only certainty is that media channels and the communications industry will continue to change, and it will get faster and become more diverse, which means that you need to constantly train and upskill to stay on top of your game.
Welcome to my world. I love all that speed. Let me show you our closing slide, if I may. Thank you. So 4 things to remember, 4 takeaways for you from today. International communications, the simplicity and brevity of messaging. Words are important, whether you're creating a soundbite for a radio interview, you're writing an explanation for a press release, or you're crafting a wonderful description of your product for a feature article. The words you choose to use and the way you choose to use them are very important. The power of visuals. It doesn't matter if it's a stills photograph that you've taken with the DSLR camera, or it's a quick piece of footage that you shot and edited on your smartphone. It must tell a story. The need for cultural awareness. If you are trading internationally, you must have an awareness of cultural difference. You must respect the culture that you're trading in, but you must preserve the uniqueness of your own brand. And a large part of that is a product of your own culture. And finally, communications is storytelling. Communications moves quickly. You must be able to react and interact. Communications isn't rocket science. It's storytelling. It's a skill. And to compete on the international stage, you need access to a platform which will give you the communication skills to make your business shine. The PR Training Academy can help you to do that. Thank you very much. Back to you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for that excellent presentation and amazing information. So now we have quite a few questions from around the globe, and I'm going to apologize in advance. We're probably not going to be able to get to everyone, but if we do not, we will follow up after the webinar and make sure we answer all those questions. So first off, our first question is from Gerard from Tetra Pak out of Sweden. And his question is, we see incredible leadership on the global stage in this COVID-19 times. The brilliant leadership of Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand's juxtaposed with the UK and US and at other extremes. Are there lessons in communications, good and bad, that we can learn from these examples in business also?
Oh, great question, Jared. Jacinda Ardern is one of my great finds for the last 12 months. I have been following this woman and been fascinated by her. I think she is a supreme example of political leadership. And yes, the short answer is business has a lot to learn from her. If you look at how she handled COVID-19, basically what she did was she studied all of the information that was available to her. She listened to all the advice that she was given. And then she bow and arrow laser focused on people. Not on what will happen to the economy, not on what happens where an island will be in lockdown, people can't get in, people can't get out. She literally said, I'm going to concentrate on people and keeping people safe. And once she did that, she acted very quickly and very decisively. And she did what every good leader does. She said, this is what we are doing. I have listened, I have heard, I have decided, now get on with it. This is what we all do. And people actually, I think, responded very, very well to the fact that she was a woman who was on top of her brief. She knew what she was doing, what's to argue with. She also, though, in fairness to her, so I think any business that operates in the same way has nothing to lose. But in fairness, she also was coming from a position of great respect. She is highly respected as a political leader, which is extraordinary. In Westchester University in the United States was one of the first campuses to close. I spoke with their PR professor a couple of weeks back. They were one of the first campuses to close in the US. And they did so at the spring break. And it was the same idea based on research with the students that said students are going to go to states all over the states and come back and bring COVID back with them. And they closed for 3 days solid. Local media said, what are these people at? They have overreacted. They've gone crazy. This isn't necessary. But they, like Jacinda Ardern, had anticipated the negative and said this is the right decision to make based on people, keeping people, students and staff safe. So in the long answer to a short question is yes, I think business has a lot to learn from her. I think she's a super example of a decisive, thoughtful, insightful leader.
Yes, great leadership. Our next question comes from Jose, the CEO of Draco out of Mexico. How do we stay in our traditions, honoring our culture and at the same time communicating in standard forms or manners?
It's very important that we stay within our own cultures, but it's also very important that we respect other cultures, Jose, as you well know, I'm sure. I'm thinking that when we first started doing business in the States, My very first job was to try and get a client onto American radio, and I was trying to get him onto as many radio stations as possible. The first 3 radio stations that I rang, I did that total business pitch. This is who he is, this is what he does, this is why he'd be good as an interviewee. They weren't buying it. And suddenly, for some reason, I don't know why, it struck me that I'm ringing from Ireland, and Americans love Irish people, so I should play up on it. So the 4th phone call, I said, hello, I'm ringing from Dublin in Ireland. I have a client who has never been to America, but who'd love to talk to you on the radio. And they said, really? And I said, really? Be God and be Gara, are you the man I should be talking to? Are you the woman I should be talking to? And I did what, I don't know, I hammed up Irish. I got 27 radio interviews because of the fact that I put a cultural focus on where I was from. Now that would work and did work in that instance in the United States. In other areas, I would simply say that we are an Irish business and we're headquartered out of Dublin. So it depends entirely on the market that you're operating in. But the final part of your question was about standard forms of communication. I don't think there is a standard form of communication. We have a sort of rule in the office about 3 different types of communications that come in by email, because an email that comes in on Gmail or whatever, you've no idea where in the world it's coming from. So broadly speaking, and I'm reducing this to simple things now, the email comes in and it either says, hi, hello, or hey. So, hi, can you tell me if I join the PR Training Academy now and I buy membership, when does my membership come up for renewal? The answer to that, that's probably from somebody who's Ireland, European, on that wing. So the answer is in exactly the same tone of voice. It's, hi, thanks for your inquiry. In fact, you will renew your membership 12 months after the date in which you start. You can begin at any time that suits you. The second type of person, or the second type of email, comes in as hello. And it's, hello, I would like to make an inquiry about when exactly I should renew my membership. It is not clear to me from your website whether or not I may join now or if there's a fixed term. How exactly does this work? That is what I think of as English stroke, Indian stroke, that much more formal kind of culture. So the answer to that would be, hello, John, thank you very much for your inquiry. And thank you for highlighting the fact that this was not information which was readily accessible on our website. I'll have our technical people look at that. In the meantime, let me tell you, let me clarify for you that from the time you join, you have 12 months before you renew your membership. And the third email that comes in is the hey or heya. And it's, hey, when do I renew my membership? If I join now, how long do I get? And that's what I think of as the American wing. So that's the hey, heya. So the answer back is, hey, you can join anytime. Why don't you join right now? And we won't charge you a penny, not a cent, for another 12 months. We're looking forward to your application. Get it in right now. It's a different response. So I don't think there is a single form of communication. I think you're saying the same thing, but it's not one size fits all. You have to adapt it to the culture that you're speaking to.
Great, excellent information. Our next question comes from Rafiq, the manager of Qatar Airways. How can organizations cope with their own past shortcomings that cultivate a fair culture among employees to share feedback?
Rafiq, I think that's Rafiq who graduated with us. Is that Rafiq, Jan? Hi, Rafiq. Rafiq is a graduate of my other business, the Irish Academy of Public Relations and Orient Planet Academy. Rafiq, really good question. On the leadership issue, I'm not even going to get into that because that's like 5 hours of why are leadership in the doldrums? That's a bit worrying. But on the employee side, if you have an issue with employees and the employees, there's a very bad relationship between employees and management, you can't correct that. It is what it is. It's there now and you're in the middle of COVID-19. What you actually need to do is put people out front and center that employees will respect. And if that's not senior management, then it shouldn't be senior management. They would probably respect their own elected employee leaders, but senior management generally wouldn't go for that as an option because those employee leaders are elected to represent a trade union perspective, basically. They're negotiators, so it's not a communications role. I would think for something like this, you need to actually bring in somebody from outside. So your Qatar Airways, if you have a webinar for all of your customers, all of your employees, and you bring them all together and you bring in an outside expert who says, let me tell you what's happening in airlines throughout the world. So this is a global issue. Every single airline is struggling. Every airline has furloughed staff. Every airline has let staff go. Every airline has sought additional funding from their own governments. It's an industry that's in crisis. Accepting that it's an industry in crisis, our funds have come from what, 50% from holidaymakers, 50% from business travel, 40, 60, whatever. But this is where we got our money from. Nobody knows what the new normal is going to look like. Nobody knows where airline travel is going. So we don't know if people will hop on a plane and say, yes, I want to take holidays again. Or if people will say, I no longer feel safe. I'm going to stay home for years and just stay close by. We don't know if business people will actually say, I've become so used to Zoom meetings now, I don't need to spend all that time on a plane. Or if business people like me will say, yes, I want to get on a plane. I want to go. I like meeting people. I like face-to-face. Nobody knows what the future holds. And if I like face-to-face, will there be 20 people in a plane that can take 300? And if that's the case, how expensive is it going to be? So I think you need to bring somebody in from the outside, an expert who holds the credibility factor that management don't, to say, here's the mess that we're all in, and we would like your help with it. Nobody knows how this is going to end. So as employees, if you can give them a third channel, an external area that they can contribute to and say, what do you think is going to happen? How do you think people are going to react? Do you think they'll travel? Do you think they'll travel more? They'll travel less? Help us to try to design the new future that creates an industry that we all live in and that keeps us all in employment. I think that's probably your best way to tackle that issue.
Yes, such important information. Our next question is from Nina. She's with New Business Development out of Google, out of Spain. What is the power of PR? I know you touched upon this, and why is it so important?
Because it is, Nina. Take my word for it. PR is super important. Public relations basically is about telling, and advertising is about selling. And if you look at the way the world is today, it's all about what you're told. Employees choose to work for companies like Google because they know something about them. They know what they stand for. They know who they are. They want to be part of what Google is. I spoke to a lady in Australia last year. She was running a very large company, and she was talking about the fact that all of her most senior engineers were leaving, and they couldn't figure out why. And they had looked at all of the things that you would normally look at. So they looked at salary. They were paying the same salary as the industry equivalent. They were good. They were offering the same holiday leave. They were providing the same pensions. She could not for the life of her see what they were getting wrong. And eventually the penny dropped, and she thought, well, why don't I actually just ask them, why did you leave? And when she asked, people came back and said, because you don't stand for anything. You pay me the same amount of money that somebody else does, but your business is about making money. I want to work for a company that does something for the environment, that stands for something, that cares. And that has become much more important. And that isn't marketing, and that isn't advertising. That's public relations. I saw an advertisement a while ago, and it was for yoga classes. And it said, for every 10 people who sign up to our yoga class, we will plant a tree. And that's not about making money. That's about, this is who we are. We will help you in mind and body, but we're also conscious of the environment, and we plant a tree. And the other example that sort of catches my mind is actually trusting the channel. There was a lady I met who had lived in a very remote area of Ireland, and she'd emigrated to the States. Her mother was living on her own in a cottage in the middle of nowhere. The woman wrote to her mother every week, every single week. And when her mother eventually died, she came home for the funeral. And she said to the postman, thank you very much for delivering the letters to Mammy every week. And he said, God, you were a great woman. Every single week of your life, you wrote to your mother. And she said, yes, because I knew that every single week you would knock on the door and say, how are you? And what's she up to in America now? And you were the way that I knew that my mother was healthy and well, or dying or dead. And she trusted that channel. And that kind of communications, that kind of building that belief in a company is what public relations does. No other channel can do that for you.
Thank you, Ellen. And unfortunately, we're running out of time, but I actually have a question for you about yourself. You've accomplished so many things in your career, including being this amazing speaker, author, entrepreneur, radio host. It goes on and on, just to name a few. What are you most proud of?
Oh gosh, don't end on a nearly easy question, Carolyn. What am I most proud of? It probably sounds a bit silly, but I'm actually most proud of the fact that I've always been true to me. So that whether you were dealing with me, whether you like me or dislike me, or you like my business or you dislike my business, I know who I am. I know what I'm grounded in. I know what I believe is right or wrong. I know what I believe is ethical. And I've never compromised that standard. And I think it means that I can always sleep in my bed at night. And I think that's what I'm proudest of, that I've been true to whoever I am. I've been true to that.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being with us today. I want to thank you again for sharing your expertise with our viewers from around the world. We've had people, as I mentioned, from all regions, and the World Trade Centers, thank you, from Savannah to Moscow and to Barcelona for joining us today. Please watch for more of our seminars coming up. And tomorrow we are hosting, actually World Trade Center Barcelona will be hosting their speed dating coming up. You can look for that online. Also, if you want more information about the PR Training Academy and Ellen, please visit their website at prtrainingonline.com. Again, I thank everyone for coming today. It was a wonderful session and hope to talk soon. Stay safe and well. Thank you.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Essential online training solutions for communications professionals. The PR Training Academy.